Welcome back to Bookmas Day 5. Today let's talk about some winter recommendations. Books that give me either cozy vibes, are set in the winter, or for some reason just remind me of winter and December overall. Some of these don't have a rhyme or reason, but we're just gonna go with it. I have a little bit of everything on here, mostly romantasy. I will admit it is stacked for the romantasy, but there is a horror and a fantasy on here as well. So let's quickly go through the romantasy first. We're gonna get the two obvious ones out of the way. We have When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. I don't really think this is set in the winter, but there's just something about it. I think it's the writing style that gives me winter vibes. It just gives me like read by the fire vibes. It's not cozy by any stretch of the imagination, but the way that her very lyrical prose is, I think that it would lend for a good cold season read. This is a pretty complicated magical world where we have dragons, and when they die, they basically turn into moons in the sky. But unfortunately, sometimes those moons crash and they can destroy entire villages. It was basically due to a god that did something that he wasn't supposed to do. He is now trapped in a jewel in the ruling family's head. I know that sounds really complicated. It kind of is. There's a lot going on, but I really enjoyed the world building in this. I do think it was a touch too long. I think that the plot could have been a whole lot clearer, and the romance, while good initially and had a lot of banter, did drag on for a little bit too long. But if you like, I don't really want to tell you the trope of the romance because I feel like it's a spoiler. It is enemies to lovers, but it definitely leans more, we'll go with star-crossed lovers. I feel like that's not too much of a spoiler while also kind of giving you the vibes of what the romance is in this. Really, really good. If you haven't picked it up already and you want an intricate world, you don't mind lyrical prose, definitely pick this one up. I have one more that is a pretty well-known, very obvious one, but I at least had to mention it on the list because I feel like it wouldn't be a complete winter recommendations without it, and that's Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This one is very fairy tale-esque and set in winter, so it is absolutely perfect for the season. We have Evangeline, who has always believed in love and happily ever afters, when her fiance agrees to marry someone else, and essentially they all get cursed. And she tries to stop the wedding, and by doing this, she essentially cursed them all to live as stone. Jack says that he can undo it, but first she has to give away her first kiss. It is very whimsical. This is a very beloved young adult fantasy. I had fun with this, and I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're in the vibe for like a cozy, whimsical retelling. This screams Disney princess, and it does exactly what it sets out to do. Then we have one that is also set in kind of a wintry setting, but is very, very spicy, so it might keep you warm from the spice alone, and that is Nectar of the Wicked by Ella Fields. I don't know what about this book I loved. It is very anti-male buzzwords, yet I had a very good time with it. This is a dark fantasy romance, so definitely be aware of that going in. There are some triggers, so just look those up before you go. This is about Flea, who is a changeling in the mortal world, and she just wants to go home. Her caretaker hates her. That's why they call her Flea, because she replaced her daughter, and all she wants is her daughter back. So when the wild hunt comes and she's old enough to go, her caretaker takes her and tries to exchange her for her daughter, but unfortunately that does not go as planned. She does end up in a brothel, and one of the guys that is coming to her turns out to be a bit more than she bargained for, and he tricks her into marriage. Like I said, if you like a very, very spicy book, then this one might be for you. It is like 4 out of 5 chili peppers in a lot of ways. Sometimes the spicy scenes could have done with a little bit more context, but once we got into the second half of the story, I really liked the touch her and die kind of vibes, and I liked the ending. I do wish that she had a little bit more agency overall, but I think this was fun, quick, and if you're looking for a spicy winter read, maybe pick this one up. Next up is The North Wind, and I did not love this book, but I do want to recommend it for those of you that like a more friends to lovers type romantasy. This is about a world where everyone is basically starving, and the Frost King comes every 50 years to take a bride, and our main character does not want him to take her sister. She knows that her sister is beautiful, and she is not, because she has scars and is hardened around the edges. Of course, he takes a liking to her sister, and she basically swaps places with her and ends up going back with him, and he doesn't know that it was her. She's determined that she's going to kill him. And this sounds very enemies to lovers, but it actually was not at core. It feels more like a friends to lovers romance, and so I do want to make that very apparent because I went into it thinking that it was an enemies to lovers, and I think that's part of the reason that I didn't enjoy it as much as I could. I think the romance is sweet. It's pretty well done. This is going to be a series of standalones, and it starts with this one, and we're going to follow all of the different seasons, I believe. So I would recommend checking this out if you're a friends to lovers gal. The last romantasy is another retelling, and I feel like retellings are just so perfect for winter. I don't know what it is, but fairy tale just screams winter vibes to me. And if you haven't already guessed it, because incredible, 10 out of 10 amazing, it's The Beast of Briar and Bonded by Thorns by Elizabeth Helen. This series is not one that I expected to love, but I fell head over heels for it. It's about Rosie, and her mother was taken when she was a baby. Her father thinks that she was taken by fairies and is determined to find her again. He spent her entire life doing this. One day he goes missing, and in order to find him, she ends up in the world of fairy and is taken captive by 4 fae princes. It is a Polly Y Choose, and it's so good. I had so much fun with this first book. I've read the second. The second was amazing as well, and I'm dying to get to the third book. This one has a prominent setting in the winter, so not only does it give me fairy tale vibes, which is wintry, but it also has a winter setting as well. I don't think you have to read this in the winter, but so good. Let me like shove it off on you. If you have not already, you need to pick this up. Cassidy and Claire encouraged me to read it, and I'm so glad that I did. I think those are all of the romantasy. Let's quickly talk about a couple of others. One is The Murder at Spindle Manor. This one is not a winter setting, but it is like a gas lamp murder mystery. And there's just something about that that definitely feels very winter cozy to me. It's a cozy mystery for sure. It was the SPFBO 9 winner and definitely surprised me. We have Isabeau, who is a huntress, and she comes upon this inn and knows that there's a monster inside, but she has to interview all of the guests that are staying there in order to figure out who it is. It's just a fun, cozy time. If you like murder mysteries, you like a little touch of fantasy, and you want something very cozy, quirky, then I would recommend picking this one up. Then the other fantasy that we have is The Girl in the Stars by Mark Lawrence. It is set after the Book of the Ancestor, but you can read this without having read the Book of the Ancestor, and it's following Yaz, and in her culture there is a hole in which children who don't belong are thrown into. One day her brother is thrown into the hole, and she jumps in after him, and it opens up this world that she never knew existed. I really enjoyed this first book in the series. I thought that it was really interesting with the world building, the found family aspects, and it is set completely under the ice, so it is absolutely a winter recommendation. I think if you are looking for a young adult fantasy to dip your toes into, you want to try some Mark Lawrence, this is a good place to start. I will give full disclosure that I have not read the third book in the series and really do need to pick that up, but I enjoyed this first one a lot, and I think that the way that it ties into everything is really good, so I would recommend it. And last but not least, I could not go this entire video without recommending The Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. Darcy, one of my favorite authors of all time, cozy horror, so definitely perfect to read by the fire. Obviously, this is set in the winter. It is an isolated 1-by-1 trope, which is not usually my favorite, but I think this does it very, very well. We have a tour group that is heading off when something happens to their bus, and they end up traipsing through the woods and find a cabin to stay in, but 1-by-1 people start dying, and they're trying to figure out what's going on while also trying to get rescued. This is a fun thriller horror time. It definitely has thriller aspects even more so than horror, and if you like that kind of style, then I would definitely recommend giving this one a try as well. So those are my winter recommendations. Books set in the winter, books that just give me read by the fire vibes. Let me know down in the comments if you have any more recommendations, because I'm also looking for books to read this winter. If you just want to let me know that you were here and hanging out, a snowflake seems very appropriate. As always, thank you guys so very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!